Hello, my name is Erika Frey, and I'm one of the co-founders of Saperica. It's a nonprofit corporation, and our mission is to promote Saperavi and other Georgian grape varieties, along with Georgian gastronomy and culture in the Finger Lakes, New York, and around the US by organizing and facilitating educational seminars and exchange programs between the regions for wine and culinary industry professionals and enthusiasts. I want to welcome you to this presentation and tell you a little bit about our Saperavi Festival, which is coming up on May 14th. And if we could change the slide, please. The Saperavi Festival is the first annual to take place in the Finger Lakes region of New York. And we're bringing together Saperavi producers from the Finger Lakes of New York, as well as producers from the country of Georgia, and also some other producers from around the United States. This festival will be supplemented by some delicious Georgian cuisine from Chama Mama restaurant in New York City, and it's hosted by Dr. Konstantin Frank Winery. As part of the Saperavi Festival, we have come up with a series of Saperavi seminars, and Lasha Tsatava will tell you about one of our keynote speakers for the festival, who will be speaking about Saperavi today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lasha Tsatava. I'm also co-founder of Saperica, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Lado Uzunashvili, international winemaker with PhD in Oenology. Lado's unique skill set includes working and understanding vinification methods to produce award-winning wines from international grape varieties like Chardonnay, Viognier, Sauvignon Blanc, Verdeo, Semillon, Chenin Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Grenache, as well as native Georgian indigenous grape varieties, just to name few: Saperavi, Katsiteli, and Tsoane. Lado's roots come from a family of vintners and vignerons of 11 generations, and over the span of more than 250 years. He has been practicing winemaking from a very young age and experiencing different practices, climate condition, grape varieties, styles of wines, and philosophies around the world, particularly in Georgia, France, Ukraine, Morocco, and Australia with Hugh Hamilton wines. It is my pleasure to introduce Lado Uzunashvili, and briefly, I also would like to mention that this is our second presentation that we're recording from the Saperavi Festival series, and our third presentation will be recorded on the day of the festival. And if we could please change the slide, there is a fourth presentation coming up after the festival about microbiology of ecosystems. And please welcome Lado Uzunashvili. Lado, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lasha. Thank you for such a warm welcome. This is the second time we are doing this online seminar, and I'm so thrilled and happy to present Georgia and its unique varieties to the world, especially to United States winemakers. And this festival is going to be really a key introduction of this great variety, of its past, how it came about, and what are the general traits of it, and how it can be properly cultivated and used for, say so, to generate some really great wines, because the variety is giving all the possibilities to that. Presentation is done by Mokado Wines. Mokado Wines is my company, and through this company I'm doing lots of research and test vinifications, trial vinifications on this and other varieties as well. Just to show you Saperavi, how it grows in Georgia. This is one of the most beautiful vineyards which I love, and you can see the vineyard is really slim. I mean, the vines are really slim and grown upright. This is the way how we grow it in Georgia. This is typical cane pruning. Plantation is quite dense. It's up to about 5,700 vines per hectare. Let's go on. We know that grape wine existed on the planet for the last 30 million years, as we also already mentioned before. We are talking about Vitis vinifera grape variety, which came about in Transcaucasian region, which is Georgia proper at the moment. Transcaucasian region is the cradle to this family, which spread out from Georgia to the entire world. We see the graph depicting how on a very early stage, Georgian Vitis vinifera sprang off the tree of grape family known to that time. And this coincides to the period right after deglaciation, when Ice Age is finishing or ending and Holocene is starting. Today we are talking whether Anthropocene started or not, but yes, once we are talking about cultured grapes and agriculture, I think we should also call this period as Anthropocene, when humans make their influence on the nature and on their style of life, even by introducing cultivated grapes and culturally made wine. And this is the time when Georgia starts introducing wine into their social life. Therefore, these varieties are very interesting to the world to trace their origins, and as well as to understand how they changed or evolved throughout these centuries while migrating from Georgia to other countries, to other continents, if you like, for today's real situation. Well, Saperavi, we think it originates from marine climate. We see that yellow spot on bottom left corner, and it then traveled through southern Georgia into central Georgia, and it came to Kakheti, which is the main home now to Saperavi in the 12th century. The proof to that Saperavi is of marine origin is the fluff, which we see on the photo on the right side. And I'm gonna offer you more photos, the proof to that. And we can see that we can see that Saperavi develops fluff in different ways, and it can be really unique to even individual leaves, not only to the regions or clones, but also to individual leaves on the same vine. This is one of the most interesting expressions of Saperavi, apart from other expressions, that Saperavi is so wild, still so wild, that it can express itself in many different ways under different climate conditions, under different terroir conditions. Here we show genetic wheel of Georgian varieties with vinifera, and this is done in parallel with some international varieties, and we see how early Saperavi genome was formed on this evolutionary wheel. And today we have 4 typically different Saperavi. I don't know whether we call it variety or variations. I think the best way to express it is to call them variations, because genetically they are all the same, almost the same, if not all the same. And these 4 varieties or variations of Saperavi are great material to use for future cloning and development of different, again, clones of Saperavi to adapt them to different climate conditions. And climate conditions, as you know, are giving us some big surprises nowadays. Out of these 4 variations of Saperavi, the 2 are most interesting. This is Saperavi Roundberry and Saperavi Budeshuri. They're exactly the same, but the only difference is that the shape is different. Budeshuri Saperavi has ovoid shape, while Roundberry is Roundberry. And also Saperavi Budeshuri matures a little bit earlier, has acidity more supple than Roundberry Saperavi, and as well as tannic structure is capable to mature on an earlier stage than Saperavi Roundberry.
And Lado, I think the Budeshuri also has, when I've tried it, has a slightly different flavor profile as well. Would you
yes,
agree?
it is more, yes, it is more, if we, let us say so that the parameters has to be comparable. If you grow these 2 variations in the same area, exactly the same conditions, climatic conditions, then you notice that Saperavi Roundberry shows more fresh kind of live type of flavors at the same maturity point than Saperavi Budeshuri. Saperavi Budeshuri can get on more jammy kind of mature fruit profile, like pruny type of flavor profile, while in Saperavi Roundberry you can have more cherry and blackberry expression. You also have this color index, which is quite different in both. Saperavi Roundberry can show you this blue tinge on the meniscus, while Saperavi Budeshuri can lack it. It also depends on the chemical composition of the soil, but mainly Saperavi Roundberry has this very fashionable color, really vibrant color, while Saperavi Budeshuri being more supple, low in acidity, maturing at a little bit earlier stage. It has more, not really a crimson expression, but on rather mature side of color as well, and that is also indication to its aroma profile. Sometimes when you see it in meniscus, it tells you how mature and what you expect. All right, this is an interesting slide. I think we need to split this information between you and me, Erika, as we see it in following slides. I will share the information which is from my side, how Saperavi and other 37 varieties, most out of which then got lost on the way to the West, traveled to United States and around the world, I would say. In the 70s of the 19th century, there was an ampelographer, a grape specialist, of French origin, browsing in Georgia and studying Georgian varieties. And he came up with 37 varieties, which he took with him and resettled them into Crimea, Ukraine. I have to stress on it, not Russia. And he let them rest there. And after a few years, he took them back to France. And this is the time when France is attacked with this vicious bug, phylloxera. The French got really serious about imported varieties, and they started pulling them out, just literally destroying them. But somebody smart, we don't know who, and we need to check this history, took Saperavi and Cacitelli to Virginia. Virginia was quite humid and hot for Saperavi and Cacitelli at that time, because they had no phenogenetic adaptability to such conditions. It was really strange to them, and they did not perform really well under these climatic conditions. That is before the First World War. After the First World War and before the Second World War, somebody took Saperavi to West Coast Australia, modern UC Davis collection fields. And from there, Saperavi in 1954, to my best knowledge, went to Australia. Australia has been the home to Saperavi for a long time, and a couple of years ago I took Saperavi from Australia back to Georgia. So this is the clone which traveled around the globe and hasn't been touched, I would say, by Soviet science, and the purity of it and adaptability to hot, dry climate is really important for us today, because we are getting warm and hot. Now, Erika, back to you with your story about Saperavi. I think
I just
your
wanted
part is one
to-
of the most interesting, because it's like about 70 years behind of my story in timeline. And I think that these two have to be compared and checked how they affected the travel.
Yes, I mean, it seems that the Saperavi that was in Virginia did not take well. So,
No, would not.
Saperavi has another pathway to the United States, and that was with Dr. Konstantin Frank in the 1950s, 1960s. Dr. Frank was actually born in the Ukraine and trained there, getting a PhD from Odessa Agricultural College in 1930. And after or around World War II, his family had to flee the Ukraine. So they eventually settled in New York, and then into upstate New York, where he worked at the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station in Geneva, New York. He actually was a very strong advocate for Vitis vinifera, which was not growing very much in New York State at the time. And his experience from working in the Ukraine, especially with phylloxera-resistant rootstock, really helped him to sort of prove a case that Vitis vinifera could be successful. And part of what he did is, when he established his own winery and a nursery, he brought many different varieties of Vitis vinifera to upstate New York, to the Finger Lakes region. And amongst these were several Georgian grape varieties, especially as we talk about today, Saperavi. So the Saperavi that we find now in the northeastern part of the United States seems to have some link back to Dr. Konstantin Frank. He was a very influential winemaker. So there were many people that befriended him, followed his work, and got cuttings from the vineyard. So a lot of the Saperavi that's now definitely in the northeastern part of the United States has some sort of traceability back to Dr. Frank.
Just to add a quick point, the Dr. Konstantin Frank's experience of working after earning his PhD comes from Trubetskaya estate in a Volga region, from very, very cool climate, where he learned to work with this and experimented working this with these varieties. And that this was one of the reasons why he was so convinced that Vitis vinifera can grow in Finger Lakes region. And of course, he had an arsenal of grape varieties that he knew can survive in that cool climate from his experiences in Trubetskaya State from Volga River.
Well, these are, I think, two excellent stories about journey of Saperavi, and they differ from each other by at least 70 years. If we check them, then we will know what are the influences made on these clones, before the Soviet era and during Soviet era. So to my wow, something's, I can't change the, okay. To my best understanding today, we have this need of varieties which can adapt themselves to new realities. And as I mentioned a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I took this Saperavi, which traveling around the world back to Georgia. Why would I do this? Today we are discussing a lot, and we are going to see it later on also, about climate changes. We blame humans for it. We don't blame humans for it. We say this is a natural cycle. We say this is not a natural cycle, or we say both. We observe natural cycle, and then we also see the human influence, which is the truth to me, because natural cycle is here, and if we see the researches of these great scientists of the 20th century or the 21st century, these cycles will repeat themselves over, I don't know, millennia, as they've done so far. For the last 420,000 years, the climate repeated itself almost perfectly 4 times, and we are 4th peak. Now, once winemakers are talking and touching upon such points of climate condition as changing, then we need to think of what we are doing. And Saperavi is a natural pearl to us, to all the winemakers. What we see in its performance, say it in Georgia, in Crimea, in Eastern Europe, in United States, which is Finger Lakes, and on the West Coast as well, people are growing Saperavi, and Australia is becoming one of the biggest countries producing Saperavi wines. That is something really unique for us to have a look at, because this variety is a variety which can be seen from a very new modern perspective for the future, whether we are cultivated to produce it as a single varietal wine or as a great blender, and we are going to see it later on. Saperavi clone, which I took from Australia, has gone through all these climatic conditions, and roughly saying, it has this knowledge, climatic knowledge of different terroirs, and we can use it back in the country of its origins, which is now experiencing some, not yet, thanks God, catastrophic changes, but very significant changes in climatic pattern. And after a few years, once we propagate this clone, we hope that we will have Saperavi, which will take this heat and dry season in much better shape than it has been so far. Now, to talk about Saperavi's performance in radically different climatic conditions, I picked 2 or 3 cases, starting from one of the coolest, I would say, at Niagara Falls, Chateau Niagara. I personally exchanged with Jim Baker, and I'd like to thank him once again for him sharing his information with me. I have not been to Finger Lakes. I hope to arrive Finger Lakes and see Saperavi myself in the near future. But the information he shared is very interesting. Saperavi is grape variety which frost hardy, takes quite low temperatures. It can perform with this short vegetation period of the year and still deliver some really nice wines. The growth is good, the berry set is good, you even have to control its crops, not to really overload it. And it can deliver some styles of wines which can't be delivered in, say, warm climate conditions, because Saperavi, as soon as you touch it, the color is gushing out of the skin and it colors the juice very intensively. While in this case, as I understood, and he may be able to correct me if I'm mistaken, he even delivers some nice rosé wines from Saperavi, which is something really, really strange in good sense to Georgians, because we try to make Saperavi rosé, but we can't, because it colors up immediately when it pressed at the crusher. So the climatic expression of Saperavi in this case is something different and interesting to deliver some new styles of wines. And his comment is that they love the grape. It gives nice fruit, substantial body, which is very good for cool climate areas. And it is much, more intense in its body expression than traditional Western European varieties, which is once again proving Saperavi's resilience under this type of climate condition. Thanks for this to Jim Baker for sharing this information. Now, the next is Patriotic Wines. I consulted this company for 7 years in the 90s. We are still very good friends, and we keep quite tight, close relationships between us, between two sides, and we always exchange. And I'm happy that this company was able to develop, I was happy to develop one of the styles which really drives me so happy. From the Barossa Valley, Australia, you may understand that in Barossa Valley we have quite warm climate conditions, and the style of Saperavi is most radically opposite to Niagara Falls, which is absolutely and naturally understandable. Color is deep Bordeaux with obvious crimson, as we characterized the Shuri Saperavi just some time ago, and effects of this we can seek in temperature sums, of course, and in the radiation of the sun, which is quite intense in Barossa Valley. It's almost chewy in its structure, but at the same time has very supple tannins. And from my side, I can add that this is something this grape can give you the wine which is close to perfection, I would say. It's so good in such climate conditions. And the comment is that they love this variety from the very first tasting. I brought my Saperavi samples first in 1998 when I was traveling from France to Australia, called in Georgian, and collected my Saperavi wines and took it to Australia. So since that day, this team just fell in love with this variety. The other case in Australia is Hugh Hamilton Wines, and here too I consulted this company for a number of years and we keep close ties here too. And Hugh's observation is that this variety is born to survive and to still give you a high quality wine. What he means is that in 2004 we had such a case when we had one of the longest heat wave, and he was preparing himself to harvest Saperavi, and in the morning he came to the vineyard and there was no Saperavi. You can imagine his emotions, and he called me in the middle of the night, and he says Saperavi disappeared. And what he meant is that Saperavi took all the juice from berries back into the plant body to survive after such a heat. But this trait of Saperavi is very significant to those who grow Saperavi under hot climate conditions. So really, I mean, the wilderness we see in Saperavi is expressed through not only some kind of particular character, but there are a series of expression of its wilderness. And today, this brand Hugh Hamilton Saperavi Oddball Saperavi is one of the most loved wine styles, not only in Australia proper, but anywhere in the world. Both. Now,
Lado, could I ask, talking about Australia, how
Sure.
would you compare the Saperavi qualities to Shiraz, a typical like Barossa or McLaren Vale Shiraz?
Thanks for the question. I think this is the direction of talks about Saperavi we need to develop and evolve into many other perspectives to compare Saperavi to other grape varieties. Saperavi and Syrah both we can consider as warm climate varieties. But if you take Syrah to the same Niagara Falls, Syrah would not perform as well as Saperavi does at this cool climate region as this Niagara Falls are, because Syrah goes like, very vigorous. It grows huge clusters. The berries are very juicy, and the best you can make out of it is nice rosé to my best understanding and from my experience of Syrah, because we had Syrah in Georgia in cool climate conditions growing next to Saperavi, and Syrah, I'm sorry, Syrah, I mean, body-wise and structure-wise, would disappear in comparison with Saperavi. Saperavi was so well structured and harmoniously built wine, and expressive and deep and layered and exuberant, and whatever the good terms you can find to describe this wine, while Syrah was not performing as well. It would give you some
So
green.
even in Georgia, you can find
even
that
in Georgia, this is
comparison of a cool climate.
Yes, why I went back to Georgia, because I could have Saperavi and Syrah there in this relatively cooler climate, and then considering the cool character of the climate in Niagara Falls. Well, if you get back to Saperavi reality in Australia, then both I think are born for these climate conditions. So they are very good competitors, and modesty put aside, I would say this driving force of Australian wine industry, as Syrah is, sometimes is giving in to Saperavi main traits as a variety. Saperavi sometimes overpowers or Syrah. Mind you that I'm fond of Syrah, and I've made Syrah in Australia, in France, and as I mentioned in Georgia as well. But I think Saperavi's potential is again laying in its unchanged wild genomic makeup, which shows up everywhere under any climatic conditions and delivers really great wines, I would say. And when you compare the depth of these wines, say Syrah and Saperavi, under the same climate conditions like McLaren Valleys or the Barossa Valleys, you find Saperavi wines much deeper, much more expressive and more exuberant, or more appealing. I mean, I'm a lover of big wine, expressive wine. There you are. You have the case here. If this answers your question. Erika.
Yeah, no, I think that's I like that, even bringing it back to Georgia, even in Georgia, you have cooler climates and warmer climates, but you'll find
Absolutely.
Saperavi throughout. And I mean, in a sense, that's true in Australia with Shiraz too. But certainly, when I look at my Instagram, I follow hashtag Saperavi. I would say about a third of the posts that I see are from Australia. So it's a very popular grape variety in Australia.
This is what I love about Australia, and I'm quite sure Americans will develop this trend also. This is, of course, I mean, in our interest to make this Georgian variety famous, but it also has all the characteristics to be great. And Australia, I was mentioning, this is what I love about Australia, because Australians take it, I mean, at once, take this new trend at once, and they really have this diversity of climate conditions and soils, and they are so good in viticulture and winemaking, and they really are very quick to develop something new. And this new, I think, is now on everybody's lips, and the name is Saperavi. Believe me, Saperavi is talked about in Australia a lot. Actually, I'm sitting now in Australia. I'm talking to you from Australia.
Wonderful. Erika, it would be also interesting to observe your hashtag after the Finger Lakes Saperavi Festival, if anything's gonna change, and you'll see the new geographical region popping up in the posts, which I really hope.
I hope so. I hope so. I really can say that this is one of very few varieties which properly cultivated and, as we say in Georgia, built in vineyards, won't let you down. It will deliver a style, maybe different, but a style which will be appealing to a significant part of or number of wine lovers. That is my absolute belief, what I've seen through these years observing Saperavi in many different areas of the world. So of course, I wish all the new growers or wanting to grow Saperavi good luck. But at the same time, again, modesty aside, the luck is in the genomic pool of Saperavi. It can deliver great wine. Now, talking so much about its mysterious traits and characteristics, I think we need to mention a few aspects of it. It's a variety which still has genomic pools formed about 3,500 years ago. That is well documented in some research. Research is done in Europe. It shows most wild properties depending on the growing areas. So what I mean here is that it can show you properties, say, the ones which can be shown under other climatic conditions. So when you exchange, I mean, Saperavi growers, when you exchange with each other, please consider in what kind of climate conditions you are in, and how you present and describe your case to, say, your colleague from warmer climate conditions. This is very important. Variety is the master of survival, as we already mentioned. Its origins are from marine climate. This is once again proving its resilience. It originates from marine climate, and then it traveled to strictly continental climate conditions of the east of Georgia. So that talks about its adaptability apart from its world appearance in other climate conditions, and special traits. Again, we already mentioned adaptability, and one more, exceptional blender. Saperavi is an exceptional blender. Really, it blends with Syrah perfectly. It blends with Cabernet Sauvignon perfectly. Cabernet Franc becomes much richer with Saperavi. you can see all these, especially in Cabernet Franc, in cool climate, I would say, you know, when we observe this special taste profile on tannic side, it almost, if not disappears, but Saperavi suppresses it so much that that part of character, this wet tannic character, almost disappears from the wine profile. Hence, we consider this variety the variety of the future. And we already mentioned that we observe some world's leading terroirs, how they suffer from climate changes, and they introduce some varieties their everyday wine life. I don't think we should go on and name them. We all know what is happening in France, in Spain, in Italy, and other regions of the world. Germany became warmer. England started cultivating grapes a few years ago. So these things are happening, and again, here we have Saperavi, which can be used as a variety, helping those traditional varieties to survive, or helping survive many more years without these regions thinking of changing these varieties from the ones which are strange to their reality. This is, I think, also commercially viable and interesting, because when you change your variety, Bordeaux, you better leave your traditional varieties and help them somehow. I'm not, of course, giving a lesson to Bordeaux winemakers. They are great in their job, how they do their job, but this is just a thought from another perspective. And we've seen Saperavi blends in Georgia and outside of Georgia showing some really, really exceptional results. Now, Saperavi has, as a variety, has four properties which help it generate great wines. Easily accumulates sugar under most of climate conditions where it grows, and we always talk about it from cold to warm. That is 10%, which is nominal, just minimum you can do these growing areas. They can go up to 16.5 average. I've seen Saperavi maturing, you know, potential alcohol degree of 18, even if you let it go that far in its maturation. As it is by titration, it depends on soils a lot, and it can be between 5.5 to 13 grams per liter, which is I think the foundation to very healthy fermentations. Its pH doesn't change a lot. It retains acidity throughout fermentation, although it then loses acidity while alcohol is generated and then in cold part of the year, of course, but it's natural, but still it retains it, and then the wine really vibrant, lively. Extremely well expressed color and tannin. I think all these secrets are laying in its name as well. Saperavi, translating to English, means something what can color something else. It's coloring, it's temperature variety. It's very strong in color and tannic structure, and it can deliver this color and tannin under almost any climatic conditions where grapes are grown today in the world, and perfectly expressed varietal aromas. It really shows its varietal aromas. So maybe some expression of varietal aroma is stronger under, again, one climate conditions when the others are expressed more in other climate conditions. But it's natural to any variety, and this is what we have to look for. So this is what is creating the diversity in winemaking when we grow the same variety under different climate conditions. This is also a tool to design and come up with different styles of wine And Saperavi responds to its growing conditions rigorously. Best soils. There is a list of best soils. For Saperavi, say red clay topsoil, stony and or sandy over limestone, carbonate bedrock, which my own vineyard is sitting on, say in the area, and some other neighboring vineyards which I am observing and making wine from. To me, this type of soil is really something still enigmatic in delivering quality of Saperavi. This is true pearl of Saperavi expression under such conditions. Red clay, solid sandy white clay followed with limestone. I position it number 2 soil conditions for Saperavi. And then alluvial sand and gravel over limestone base, which is in the case of the United States in many areas, alluvial sandy and well-drained. This is the case of Australia. And in Australia, we observe also Saperavi grown on the soils where these ocean beds came up as a result of natural seismic activities, and you can find these shells of ancient antique marine life, and Saperavi giving you some incredible properties. Best pruning methods depends on the climate conditions. Cane pruning is not even disputed in Georgia for Georgian varieties. Whether this is our traditional mentality or we trained our varieties for this way of pruning, I don't know. Don't ask me, please. This is the way we go for centuries, and I think we are going to remain the same for many, many years. We tried Saperavi pruned with spur pruning, cordon, like typical French way of pruning in one of the vineyards years ago, but it goes like, it creates a bush around itself, and shades its clusters a lot, and under Georgian reality, it doesn't really compare to the way it delivers fruit quality with cane pruning. Maybe in warmer climate conditions we can use spur pruning cordon because there is more sun, and sometimes under such conditions like Australia is, you even create this shading conditions for your grapes not to, roughly saying, burn out your fruit and tannins and etc. Saperavi, as we say, historically trained for cane pruning. However, thanks to its wild pushing properties, cordon is also used as a conclusion. But please observe, please ask, please see, and then make your own decision under your own climate conditions and soil conditions. Yes, Erika.
You could tell I was going to ask a question.
I can see you on the screen.
I was wondering, are there any soil types that you should not plant Saperavi?
Yes, definitely. But let us make case, if I were to plant Saperavi, which soil I would not use. This is rich, fertile soils, especially so-called Chernozem, like forest black soil. In no way. I don't think.
With a lot of organic material, is what you're saying.
Yes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that soil, I mean, but just to not to be so radical in definition of the future style of wines coming out from such soils, these soils can be used for light body, maybe red wines or rosé, if it allows you to, drain the juice with no much extraction of color. So that is all I would consider under rich organic soils. But Saperavi is a variety which is performing exceptionally well under stress conditions, where of course, mild stress, I don't mean stress which can destroy the quality of the fruit. Mild stress can be hydrostress or temperature stress or nutritional stress, and even irrigation. Non-irrigated irrigated Saperavi wines are much greater, from my personal experience, than the ones which are irrigated, because we see vineyards which are growing, grape growers which are growing Saperavi for pure commercial wine quantity, and we see the vineyards and grape growers which grow Saperavi grape premium wines, and there is difference like 180 degrees. You load Saperavi with lots of fruit, you have something different, which is again normal for any variety. But why I'm stressing on this is that Saperavi is or has never been considered as heavily producing grape variety. The best from my personal experience is between 6 to maximum 8 tons. 6 to 7 tons are, top of the quality, even lower. If you have 5 tons per hectare, not per acre, please, because per acre it's going to be too much. I just realized that some of the listeners are from the United States. So I'm talking about per acre, per hectare. I'm sorry, again. So to me, the golden average is about 6.5. 5 tons is absolute top quality. But again, it's about an individual case, how commercially viable the vineyard or the entity producing such wine is going to be, because when you have too few tons per hectare, then your finances may be suffering for this reason. So again, it's just an individual case, what you are going to do in your home. Now, Georgia's Georgia's reality is like this. We consider Saperavi as a principal variety in our wine industry by all or most what is listed on this slide. It's a historical variety. It's a historical variety to us, and then the history of Saperavi and our culture is almost inseparable. We can't separate them. Then throughout the centuries, Georgia or Saperavi formed natural appellation areas, and we list here how many of them. This is just a few. These are equivalent to PDO's protected denomination of origin, or AOC, which is appellation d'origine contrôlée, or some controlled origins in other terminologies of other countries. But we also, of course, we see Saperavi outside of these areas, giving some really incredible qualities, or different styles at least, of wines. Then this variety is also great to use in both directions of winemaking, like in our Georgian reality. Quarry wine, which is subterranean terracotta vessels of 8,000 years history, and this technique, as you may know, has not changed throughout these 8,000 years, 80 centuries, to show this time from with different numbers, and this method was registered or has been recognized as intangible cultural heritage of humanity as from 2013. So this variety, of course, is born or was born to deliver wine styles in this way of vinification. And we are coming to the modern days, and Saperavi is performing anywhere in the world, as we've been talking about it. And we can make Saperavi wines as modern as you like, fermented in stainless steel, big oak vats, concrete vessels of different shapes, whether it's egg shape or angular or whatever the shape. We can punch it down. You can do delestage. You can do a simple pampova. You can do long, short macerations. You can do. I've even done MLF on mark, which is sorry for my language, crazy for winemaking or winemakers, but I've done that and it works. Believe me, it works. And it gives you some really special styles. And the oak part of winemaking, Saperavi wines, is very significant. Saperavi is a variety which literally devours any oxygen uptaken by through any operation, any technique, especially in oak. It matures in French oak much longer than in American oak. American oak is something what I love for Saperavi because of its porosity and oxygen ingress compared to, say, the same famous Tronce, which is with much finer grain. Obviously, these wines are going to be different, but again, we need to somehow speak about it to know that Saperavi can perform in different oak materials of different sizes.
There's a Finger Lakes producer, McGregor, who ages in American oak, and they found a lot of success with American oak aging.
Oh yes, especially those who are in cool climate conditions, or those who are putting out younger styles of Saperavi out into the market, in the market.
Well, they also age for they also age their wines quite a long time as well.
Yes. According to Ron Jackson, and we have not mentioned this before in our conversations, Ron Jackson, in its, I think, one of the first editions, he, well before Georgia was recognized as cradle of Vitis vinifera, and of course, obviously Saperavi, somehow he brought up Saperavi, picked up Saperavi out of all varieties we have in Georgia, maybe in the world as well. And he says that Saperavi is best to taste between 4th and 40th year of its evolution or maturation. So you can imagine how strong this variety, the wines out of this variety are, that they can live for such a long time. I have Saperavi of 2008 in my collection, in my Mukado collection, and they're just marvelous styles. 14 years Saperavi, nothing really, nothing. And there is a proof of such a great scientist as Ron Jackson was. I always read his book and compare these regions all around the world. And I think the angle he could see the origins and evolution and everything, birth of wine and everything, is one of the best in the world. Written the way it's written.
Certainly, one of the things that we notice is because of the color, the teinturier nature, it seems that the color does not fade very quickly when the wine ages. So
yes, I'm gonna act now as an advocate of Saperavi once again, of course. But when we are talking about, I think this is something what we need to expand when we say color about Saperavi. I think behind the color we have this enormous array of different layers of phenols and tannins, and condensed tannins when it matures. And then this is what makes Saperavi's longevity so unique and the variety is so unique for all or most styles of wine, whether it's young or matured, and those wines can be cellared for a number of years, exactly thanks to the properties you described, Erika. Tannin, I think tannin structure in Saperavi is something that keeps it alive for a long, long time.
So just to be a devil's advocate here, why? What about Cabernet Sauvignon? It produces not in a cool climate conditions, but ample of tannin, good for aging.
In Cabernet Sauvignon, you know that Cabernet Sauvignon has these herbaceous, beautiful herbaceous characters.
The parental trait, and then
yes, I'm going to touch upon on this particular part of its taste aroma profile. If you, I mentioned that we grew Syrah and Saperavi in Georgia together. I have to mention that we grew Saperavi, Syrah, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Sauvignon, and Nero d'Avola actually together under the same sun. And this gave me, that was at Chateau Mukhrani, at my previous project, which is one of the best in Georgia by its history and everything else. And our results were comparable. Again, when Saperavi was technically mature to deliver wines with mature tannin structure under the same conditions, Cabernet Sauvignon would remain really, really green. Not pleasantly herbaceous, but I mean green. And when we are talking about Saperavi as a great blender, Saperavi always came handy to somehow soften this property impact in Cabernet Sauvignon. And I'm sure if we talk to the same producers in Finger Lake or Niagara Falls, they would confirm my impression that Cab Sav can remain much greener in those cool climate conditions than Saperavi, just to be or to have some comparable comparable results, because to compare two varieties or three varieties, you need to grow them in the same area.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
And here too, I think for those areas, although maybe Finger Lakes and Niagara Falls both are warming up thanks to today's climate changes, but still Saperavi, I assure you, will come very handy within those internationally recognized 15%, not to be declared or stated on the label. Great blender, design, bigger styles or great styles of wine.
Just one more question in the same direction. Would it be for Cab Franc? Is Cab Franc also a late ripener comparing to Saperavi, right?
I think Cab Franc is yes, one of the latest maturing varieties in the world. Cab Franc needs enormous amount of active temperatures compared to say same Pinot, for example, to radically see the scenario why Oregon and these cool climate areas in the United States are performing so well in Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot, because Cab Franc, compared to say California, cannot perform as well as in those warm, sunny areas like Sonoma, Napa, or Paso Robles, or other areas of warm Californian climate conditions.
And that's exactly what we hear in Finger Lakes, that Saperavi can more consistently deliver quality fruit comparing to Cabernet Franc.
Absolutely.
However, in the region, for some reason, Cab Franc, maybe because of general recognition of the grape variety, has more edge and recognition. But the purpose of
that is thanks to the history, I think. But we are going to change the history with Saperavi.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, I'm absolutely with you, Lasha, when you say that Cab Sav has some great expressions in certain climate conditions. What we are talking about is how widely Cab Franc can be competing with Saperavi, if we put
And
in
as you
another way.
always point out, using, we discussed Saperavi's range of different climatic conditions, but if we focus and zero in on a Finger Lakes region, on this cool climate place, and then that in compare Cabernet Sauvignon and Cab Franc in that particular set of conditions, then Saperavi might be peeling off in many different aspects and attributes as a better winemaking grape variety in that particular region due to this ability of ripening and providing the four main ingredients for making quality wine, as you always point out.
I think you're absolutely right, and I tend to agree with each of your word how you described. In addition, allow me to bring something different into our conversation. For the last, and you are educators, Erika, especially you, and we've been trying to define what is a noble variety. We've been talking in many different aspects and perspectives how to describe, how to evaluate what is a noble variety. To me, Saperavi is a noble variety, one of the most noble varieties I've come across, because it never, as we described, never lets you down. It does make a style of wine, always. A style of wine which can appeal to a huge number of wine lovers. And this is not a how would I put it? I don't even know. A characteristic which can be not seen. We have to see this property of this variety. Once we see this property of this variety, that it is so noble that it never lets you down under many or most climatic conditions, then you know that going with it is a winning case. Cab Sav, I think, occupies more areas around the world than any other red varieties. Saperavi has too far to go to even reach 10, 15, 20% of the area what's occupied by Cabernet Sauvignon. So I don't think we have to fear of its propagation, of its cultivation, of its areas enlarging and occupying, different AVAs, as you say, in the United States. So this variety is a really noble variety. When we started this presentation, I honestly say what I feel now. I did not remember about this slide here, what is on the screen, that we had it here. And I already spoke about it, how at Chateau Mouhrani we compared these four varieties. You see on the bottom, Syrah, Cabernet, and Petit Verdot. I say Cabernet, but it's not Cabernet Franc, it's Cabernet Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. And these wines were made in very different ways. I don't even know what was the oxygen uptake in each of them. I don't know. I don't remember what is. I have to bring up all those unification notes, but it doesn't really matter. Even randomly, you can see how strong Saperavi is in its anthocyanin part. I'm showing here resveratrol part of phenols here. This is a really great variety, and with such a huge amount of resveratrol, you can imagine how strong it is in preserving its initial properties, which is freshness of the wine. It is the wine which really, as we said just a few minutes ago, devours oxygen. It resists to aging, and at the same time, ages really harmoniously over a long time. It can give you a case in which you can see your future strategy under your own climate conditions. It works with you with pleasure and gives you a pleasure to work with it. Saperavi is a variety which is something, I would say it's a working horse, you know, like same Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. If you take these two varieties, they performed all around the world, you know, better than any other varieties. And here we are facing Saperavi, the next hit, as some people consider on the world wine stage. It's a really next hit in terms of its ability to deliver wines under different kind of conditions. It allows you to work with it. There are some varieties which will limit you in winemaking techniques or style design. Say Merlot disappears under hot conditions, while in the same conditions, Saperavi can give you some great wines. If you take a case of white varieties, let's go out of reds and go into white, say Sauvignon Blanc. You know, Sauvignon Blanc found its modern home in such cool climate conditions like the same Oregon or New Zealand, for example, while it gives you completely different style, or you would not even consider to plant it in, say, Moroccan reality, in African reality. Yeah, I made plenty of different French varieties, but I could not see Sauvignon Blanc placed there. And here too, coming back into reds, Saperavi is a variety which has this historic knowledge, I think, of ever-changing climate conditions. You know, out of these 11,700 years since deglaciation started, and then about 10,500 years when wild grapes are seen by humans and used by humans, it develops its knowledge and tolerance to, you know, changing climate conditions. And out of these 8,000 years since we started winemaking, the climate was also changing. It's in its micro expressions. I'm not saying about this general curve of climatic changes. So here we have really a variety full of wisdom to use for or under different conditions, growth conditions. I don't know how much more I can say about this variety. I can go endlessly, really. So here we state that these vineyards were grown, these results are comparable, as you can see the statement just popped in on the screen. Again, the greatness of Saperavi, you can see dry extract and the total phenols. There are some gigantic wines, you know, dry extract 42 grams per liter, number 4 from the bottom, and 3,458 milligrams of phenolic part of it, of the body per liter. These are big wines, which were made in Georgia some few years ago, and we started analyzing Saperavi wines compared to international analogs. And this was done in wine laboratory, one of the most important laboratories in Georgia proper. And this laboratory, just for your information, is accredited in Brussels for certification of Georgian wines for worldwide exports, and certificates and analysis issued by this laboratory are recognized elsewhere in the world. Here too, we show just two white grape varieties, Katiteli and Fiqui, made into amber wine, and then bottom four are Saperavi wine. And that is vinification done in amphoras, why we put these two different styles like amber and red wines together, just to accentuate how big tannin structure can be achieved while you vinify Saperavi in Kvevri, which is Subterranean terracotta vessels traditional to Georgian industry. Well, here I think we will say nothing new, as we bit by bit already touched upon this subject. The climate is, of course, changing, and we see some leading regions bringing some new varieties into their everyday practice. And I think phenogenetic knowledge of Saperavi of the latest, say, 140, 150 years, as well as knowledge of the last 8,000 years, or whatever we have for cultural winemaking. I think this variety is a survivor in all senses. It's the master of survivor, which can deliver wine on its own, and also help you blend it with other varieties and do some improvements under changing climate conditions. In Georgia, just to say, we have 525 aboriginal, autochthonic, endemic, whatever the word is, best varieties remaining. Why remaining? Because historic writings are showing that we had 1,400 varieties, but we lost more than half to these religious cultural clashes in this cultural crossroads. And as Georgia is, historically we've seen rise and fall of 17 or 16 empires. We are still there, and I think the last one making the political climate hot around us. This is the last one we are going to see. Saperavi is going to survive this one as well. Yeah. This is just pleasant information for those who grow Saperavi or want to come to Georgia and buy a plot of land to cultivate Saperavi in its origins. These are data which you can use while choosing your vineyard area. You can have this presentation. You can send out this presentation to those who are interested, of course, and they can have this data. Now, I came across this information on Wikipedia. I would not like to miss out on this opportunity. Just a couple of words. Do not trust this information, please. And the last slide. Everywhere on our carvings, in our architecture, we see grapes, grapes, grapes. And once again, thanks for recognizing Georgia as the cradle of wine. This is all from me.
Thank you. This is basically also how Erika's and my friendship started, over the conversation of where wine comes from. And thank you, Lado, for a great presentation.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
If we could change the slide to our listeners, this is the second of our Saperavi series, and whoever hasn't subscribed to YouTube channel, please do so. We will be adding new series on our YouTube channel. And yeah, keep checking back, keep learning about Saperavi. There is a lot to discover, and follow our story on Saperica's social media channels. There is a festival coming up this Saturday, May 14th, but there will be more content coming your way as well. Thank you, Erika. Thank you, Lado. And
Thank you both.
you for listening.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Enjoy Saperavi.
Nachwamdis.
Bye.